Two siblings are taken to an island to work for a cult leader. Soon, they witness the man's psychotic ways and realize they must escape their dire situation. In a store, Irina serves as the lookout while her brother Paul places canned goods in a bag. Moments later, the siblings run out of the store, and the cashier exasperatedly watches as he's once again outsmarted by children. Later, the kids return to the dirty beach to show their mother what they stole. Then, Paul finds a filthy teddy bear toy, so he and his sister take it to the water to wash it. Across the beach, a man wearing all white watches the siblings curiously. The man, Fust, lives on an island where he leads a cult that produces soap bars which he sells for profit. Years later, Irina and Paul take the boy's pet piglet Stinky on a walk. While the teen squats in the bushes to relieve herself, Fust creepily watches from afar. Suddenly, the siblings hear the alarm, alerting them that it's time to return to the basement. Inside, Albrecht tells the pair to get back to work making soap. Soon, the siblings carefully slice a slab of soap into bars, and the boy stamps Fust's name into each one. That evening, Irina tells the children a story about Hygeia, a girl who could heal any ailment with one touch, and those who drank from her chalice remained healthy forever. She continued that Dirt hated the girl, so he sent 2 snakes to kill her. However, when the animals bit Hygeia, their poison lost its harmful properties. From then on, whoever tasted their poison awoke purified before the gates of Elysium, a paradise which only the pure may enter. Later, Paul asks his sister what happens to the impure ones who can't enter Elysium, and she says they end up in the eternal garbage dump where rats slowly eat you up from the inside. However, she assures the boy that they're safe where they are as long as they're together. The next day, the workers don yellow raincoats and carry the soap to the building on the upper level where the adults reside. Inside, Letter introduces Fust to his followers, and he walks around the room as the crowd sings a song of adoration. As the cult leader addresses his people, Irina quietly tells her brother to stop playing with the soap. Moments later, the man waves pieces of cloth over the audience's faces. Suddenly, Maria approaches Fust and asks why he stopped visiting her and says he needs to wash her. However, he gently pushes the woman away and tells her to keep quiet. Irina admonishes her brother for misbehaving, prompting the child to topple the tower of soap bars. The noise catches Fust's attention, but instead of reprimanding them, he thanks the children for their work and sacrifice. Then, he takes 1 bar of soap and makes it levitate over his palm, leaving the audience in awe. He tells the teen to give him back the object, but she doesn't know what he's talking about. To everyone's surprise, the man grabs the bar of soap from behind Irina's ear. That evening, Fust scolds the remorseful Albrecht for failing to control the children and he orders Letter to whip him on the back. Albrecht states that he knows he must protect the soap and keep the workers in order, so the cult leader says he has a special assignment for him. Later that night, Letter wakes Irina and takes her to Fust's office. Inside, the man tells the teen to choose the ugliest mouse to feed to his pet snake. She does as she's told and drops the helpless animal into the terrarium. Then, Fust says that he thinks it's time for the next phase, which would entail Irina moving upstairs because he needs someone to star in the play alongside Siegfried. Conflicted, the teen says it's usually Maria's task to act in the play, so the man explains that Maria is no longer up to the role. He adds that the task requires someone who'll lose themselves in the role and would do anything to fill the stage with light, the kind of light he saw in Irina earlier today. However, he warns that if the teen doesn't take the task seriously, she may risk bringing great calamity upon them all. The next day, Irina excitedly tells her brother what happened and adds that she could almost feel what being pure must be like. However, when Paul learns that Fust asked his sister to move upstairs, he reminds her that they promised each other that they'd go up together. When he asks if she told the leader that they can't be separated, she stammers that she couldn't ask any questions last night, much to the boy's disappointment. Irina says she's sick and tired of living in the basement, prompting her brother to angrily tell her to leave. Later, Fust watches as the teen joins the adult followers during their group bath. As the gray water goes down the drain, it travels through the pipes and into a bucket in the basement, implying that it's the only water source the workers have. Later, Paul slathers pig lard onto Albrecht's face and chest. Then, the child helps the man carry boxes of soap onto the boat on its way to the mainland. Meanwhile, Siegfried entertains the crowd by creating bubbles. During the meal, Fust calls Maria out for hunching over her plate, causing the other followers to laugh at her expense. In the bushes, Paul hides and quietly watches the group with his pet pig. Then, the leader tells Irina to drink the special water, and she obliges. She jokingly asks if it's just water, but hours ago, someone filled the pitcher with Fust's bathwater, revealing that he makes his followers drink the filthy liquid. Moments later, the man asks the team to tell them the differences between living in the basement and her new life. So, she says that even though she misses the other children and the piglets, she appreciates that it smells much better upstairs. Suddenly, Paul lets Stinky loose, and the piglet runs straight for the table. However, Letter quickly rises to his feet and shoots the animal dead. Devastated, the boy mourns over his deceased pet, while the adults return to their meal as if nothing happened. Later, he watches as Albrecht slaughters Stinky so that its meat doesn't go to waste. While removing the animal's innards, the man tells Paul that doctors performed an ultrasound and found out that Fust has white organs, which is why he never gets sick. Suddenly, the child hears his sister's voice, so he peers through a grate and sees Irina and Siegfried on a stroll. The team commends the man for the bubbles earlier, and he says they need to make sure they put on a great performance in the play for their leader. That evening, the workers inhale a hallucinogenic gas from a hose. Paul asks Albrecht why Fust holds so much power, so the man explains it's because he has the most knowledge. When the child says he just wants his sister back, Albrecht tells him that she won't return because she's doing well in her current situation. While trying his best to sleep, Paul remembers riding the boat to the island with Irina and clutching the teddy bear tightly. Later that night, he sees Fust ordering Maria to get on the boat. The next day, the boy practices his lines for the play with his sister. Letter asks Fust if it's a bad idea to cast a worker, but the latter says it's what the teen wanted. Siegfried plays the character based on the cult leader, Irina plays Hygeia, and Paul plays the role of a vagrant. In the story, Fust saves Hygeia from the impure vagrant, and when the goddess asks him to prove that he is who he says he is, he stabs his chest with a retractable prop knife to display his immortality. However, the leader isn't convinced by the actor's performance. So he tells him to channel the disgust he feels whenever he looks at Paul. Insulted, the child angrily throws down his costume and staff and runs out of the room. Later, in the bathroom, Irina seduces Siegfried and they share a kiss. Then, as the man parts her legs, he sees a bright light and calls it Elysian. Unbeknownst to the pair, Paul sees everything unfold. Meanwhile, Fust tells Letter that the stench grows stronger the closer they are to the great performance. Later, Paul tells the other children that he's tired of being pushed around. That night, he sneaks into the performance room wearing a pig mask and hits Siegfried on the head with a large stick. The next day, Fust asks the boy why he attacked the actor, so he reveals that the man and his sister did the deed. When the leader asks Siegfried if it really happened, the latter says he's convinced he saw a lesion between Irina's legs. Fust places a cloth over Paul's face and sniffs him. Then, he removes the cloth, kisses the boy's forehead, and says he forgives him. Later, the other workers surround and applaud the child as he proudly shows off the bruise on his chest. Meanwhile, the cult leader and Irina watch Siegfried self-flagellate as part of his punishment. In the basement, the workers overhear the actor's pained grunts, so Paul rallies the children with a rousing speech stating that they need to accept being called dirt because it's what makes them special. While shouting a chant, the workers take down Fust's picture from the wall, place it on the floor, and dance around it in a circle. Later, Irina approaches Siegfried and he says he'll continue punishing himself until all the dirt has left his body, hence preparing him for Elysian. On the night of the play, the actor tells Fust that it'll be the greatest show he's ever seen. However, during his monologue, Siegfried goes off script and tells the audience that he doesn't think he'll ever be pure enough. He acknowledges that dirt will always be a part of him and the only way to defeat it is to kill a piece of himself. So, he takes out the blade and stabs himself in the chest. Moments ago, someone replaced the prop knife with a real one, revealing that the actor accidentally took his own life. The audience claps, unaware of what's happening. Fust checks the man's pulse, dabs some blood onto a cloth, and shows his followers. Then, he asks Paul for the knife under his cloak and shows the audience that it's the prop knife, insinuating that the boy was the one who switched the blades. The next day, Irina slathers mud all over her brother's face, and even though he swears he didn't do anything, she watches as Albrecht takes him out to sea on the boat. Later, Paul tells the man to go ahead and shoot him with the captive bolt pistol. Meanwhile, Fust presides over Siegfried's funeral and says they'll all be reunited soon enough. That night, a worker wearing a pig mask approaches the sleeping cult leader with a captive bolt pistol. However, when the stranger pulls the trigger, Fust wakes up and realizes it was a nightmare. Then, he remembers standing above Irina and Paul's mother as she takes her dying breaths. Moments later, the paranoid man scrubs his body clean with soap in the bathroom. Meanwhile, Paul and Albrecht walk across the city with the soap boxes, revealing that the man chose to spare the child's life. Soon, they speak to the owner of a gentleman's club and receive the payment for the soap. However, the man tells Albrecht that it'll be their last delivery because he's decided to switch to a Chinese supplier for cheaper liquid hand soap. He adds that he warned Fust a long time ago to adapt or risk his business dying. As the pair's about to leave, the club owner says he has a surprise for them. Concurrently, the cult leader places a few drops of a substance in his eyes. When Irina sees his father's picture, he tells her the story of how the factory started. Decades ago, his father saw his mother for the first time when she was an employee. Years later, when Fust was a teen, his parents told him the stories of ancient gods. However, his mother had an affair with one of the employees, and he saw them making love in the basement. That evening, Fust's father, who wanted to keep everything pure, punished the woman by throwing acid on her face. Meanwhile, two women cleaned the dirt off of Paul and Albrecht's bodies with sponges and soap. Decades ago, Fust's mother begged her son to end her suffering by suffocating her with a pillow. Because he believed that his father was beyond help, he stabbed him in the neck with a pair of scissors, ending his life. The man says that all the suffering he went through made him what he is, because only when one has lost everything can one hear the voices of the gods. After taking his father's life, Fust saw a vision for the first time in the bright light emanating from a painting, and he realized his true calling from then on. He says his calling is to gather the impure while Irina's role is to get them to drink from the chalice so she may become a goddess. Years ago, the girl helped her mother light the pipe so she could inhale the illegal substance, implying that the woman died because of her destructive vices. In the club, Paul sees Maria waitressing, revealing that Albrecht spared her life as well. The woman says Fust's island is rotten at the core, and even though she was ready to follow him to the very end, he cast her aside when he found Irina. Meanwhile, someone locks all the basement doors from the outside. In the hall, Fust tells his followers that Irina, whom he calls Hygeia, will quench their thirst. So, everyone obediently approaches the teen one by one and sips from the chalice. Then, the man tells those who finished partaking to move to the altar room. Concurrently, Albrecht and Paul ride the boat on their way back to the island. When it's Letter's turn, he asks the leader if he's coming with them, but Fust says they must all go alone from here on out. Outside the basement, someone attaches a hose to a pipe and fills the room with a noxious gas. The workers try to escape but they're unable to open the locked doors. Later, Paul finds a hunting rifle in Fust's office. Meanwhile, the cult leader tells Irina to enter the altar room, and she sees the followers' lifeless bodies. Eventually, Albrecht opens the basement door, and he finds all the unconscious children. Concurrently, the teen hands Fust the chalice, but as he's about to drink, he says she has to go first. She reminds him that Hygeia brings the poison, but he just tells her that she mustn't be afraid. However, Irina finally sees the man for what he is and remembers when he took her and her brother from the beach. So, the teen bashes Fust's head with the chalice, and when he asks what she's doing, she says she did it because he refused to drink. As the man lies on the floor, Irina kicks him and steps on his back. Moments later, Paul appears and points the weapon at Fust. Soon, all the children surround the tied-up cult leader on a cliff's edge. The man says he's glad he'll meet a worthy end at the hands of the teen. Then, two workers roll his body off the edge and he lands on a garbage dump on the beach. As the delirious cult leader sings to himself, a mouse crawls on his chest. Later, Albrecht and the children ride the boat back to the mainland. That evening, they all drink milkshakes while watching the dancers gyrate on stage at the gentlemen's club. Finally free from Fust's oppressive rule, Irina and Paul hold each other's hands.